For many people, high impact training has been something to avoid, something to stay away from for fear of injury, because maybe you're getting older, maybe your joints hurt. I'm going to show you today how this isn't necessarily the case and what sort of progressions you can do over a period of time to safely perform high impact training without risk for injury. The progression that we might use to get somebody from a start point, say somebody that's sedentary, but maybe has the mobility to do certain exercises, to then doing higher impact exercises later on down the road. What sort of steps do we take? What exercises do we implement? What kind of training? What does it look like? And so after assessing the individual and seeing what their mobility looks like, and if their body is ready for training, then we would go into basic strength training exercises. So very simple, straightforward things to build up not only the muscles, but also the bones, the ligaments and tendons that hold your joints together. And so doing something very basic, such as squats or lunges, will start to condition the body to strengthen these tissues in order to handle higher impact and more stressful exercise later on down the road. So this is not something that you want to just jump into on day one. You want to give your body a chance to adapt to some of these other things. Now, if you're a younger individual, you may not necessarily need this, but I will say it's still going to have a lot of value. The squat has many benefits, but it's also a good way to train your body and the joints that are involved in jumping or hopping to handle more and more stress. So if we take a stance roughly shoulder width apart, toes pointing out a bit, and we perform just simple body weight squats, we're going to be using the joints of the ankle, the knee, and the hip to perform this movement. And so all of these joints and structures that we're using in a squat are also present when we're jumping and landing. Now, if we take this a step further, you can load the squat by doing a goblet squat with a dumbbell. You can also do barbell squats, like front squats and back squats. And again, this will condition those joints that much more. So once you're able to handle bodyweight squats without much of a problem, your body's going to stop adapting to that, and you're going to need to increase the difficulty in some way. So you can do more squats in each set, but after a while, the return isn't as good. So adding some load to it will go a long way in helping those joints to strengthen. Now let's get into some single leg training, because oftentimes if we're just, jumping or catching ourselves in everyday life, say you trip on a root of a tree while you're out for a hike and you have to catch yourself on that one leg because the other one's busy flying up in the air perhaps. So lunges come into play here, or single leg training in general. Again, same structures are being used. Hip, knee, ankle are your primary joints being used in this movement. So you can do a basic front lunge. You can do a split squat where you're doing it in place. You can do a lunge return, or you can do a walking lunge where you're moving either outside or maybe indoors on a nice patch of turf like this. Then you can also incorporate multi-directional movements. So when you're doing the lunge forward, you're moving in what we call the frontal plane of movement, straight forward and back. But there's other muscles that need to be strengthened as well, like the lateral muscles of the hip, the glutes, the adductors on the inside. So that's where we get into a side lunge perhaps. You can either do it here where I'm doing like a lunge return, or you can go side to side. And that's, again, you're still training the knee, hip, and ankle, but now you're getting more of that, those lateral muscles working. And then just like with the squat, you can start to add load to your lunges or side lunges down here as well. So there's a lot of different things you can do with this. But single leg training and basic lower body training in general is going to be a big part of conditioning your body for impact exercises. So now that we've covered some of the basic strengthening exercises that you can do, my recommendation would be, if you're somebody that's not conditioned to any exercise at all, you may want to take 2 to 3 months to condition your body to some sort of physical strengthening exercises like those before you start really trying to handle more impact. What I'm going to show you next is a lower impact hop, basically a lateral hop or a speed skater, as I call them. Brian likes to call them lateral bounds, whatever term you use. This is one of my staples in my programs that I like to use. So again, we're working side to side like we did with the side lunge or the lateral lunge I showed you before. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to one side. I'm going to hop to one side. I'm going to stick the landing with one leg. And you can see right there, that challenges my stability a little bit. And so you can make this as high or as low impact as you want by simply just doing a smaller hop. And at the beginning, you really want to try to make sure that before you go again, that you're stable on that leg instead of this. Now I can make it higher impact by taking a bigger jump to the side, and that's going to, as you can see, challenge my stability more, but it's also going to increase the impact more. Okay, but the key here on any impact exercises is to limit how much impact there is by landing softly, landing on the balls of your feet, letting the joints give. If you want to hear more about that, check out our video. Brian shows how to perform something like a box jump in a way that reduces the impact. So speed skater, one of my favorite things to use when it comes to basic impact training. If you find you're really having a hard time with keeping your balance during the speed skater or lateral bound, you can incorporate the other leg into it by hopping out and then touching that other foot to the floor gently, or as much as you need to, and then eventually work your way up to not letting that other foot touch the floor. All right, so now let's incorporate the agility ladder. There's a lot of different drills you can do in the agility ladder, and everything that you do in here is a low impact exercise. So like a precursor to running, you're going to learn to land on the balls of your feet and land softly. There's many different patterns you can do in multiple different directions, which is something we want to strengthen different aspects of the lower limbs when we do this. So a few examples. First would be the quick step. So I'm going to step, taking small steps. I'm going to put both feet in each of the little boxes in the ladder. I can also perform lateral movement with many different drills, but the most basic would be the side quick step. So again, 2 feet go in each box. And I always keep my toes pointing straight ahead. And again, I'm trying to land on the balls of my feet, and I'm trying to land softly. So these are some very basic entry-level impact exercises. They're not much. You're not leaving the floor that much, but now you're starting to see that we're getting there. We're starting to have a little bit of impact, but we're already learning the basics of how to properly land and move when we do these patterns. Now, something I can do that's a little more advanced is a bunny hop. I'm going to keep both feet together, and I'm going to hop in each box of the ladder. Notice with that, I'm aiming to land softly on the balls of my feet. I'm not landing on my heels, because then I don't have the benefit of the recoil and building up that energy in my Achilles tendons. Whereas if I land on my heels, I don't get that anymore. Bunny hop can also be done sideways, where I keep my feet together and I hop in each box in a lateral motion. We've progressed from strength training exercises, which you should still be doing no matter how far along you get. You want to maintain that strength and the integrity of the joints. Then we progress to the ladder with some lower impact exercises. Now we can start incorporating some of those jumping exercises that Brian had showed. So we're going to start off with an aerobic stepper on the floor. You'll notice it's the stepper on its own. The risers are here in front, and you can gradually add more and build your way up to a higher jump as time goes on and you become more confident in what you're doing. So start off in roughly your squat stance, feet shoulder width apart. We're going to first drop down into about a quarter squat, and you're going to recoil, bounce out of the bottom, and jump up onto the box. Notice how I land softly. I stick the landing, because landing is just as important, if not more so, than the jump itself. Most often when people injure themselves, it's when they land, if they land improperly. So this is a good way to start learning that, in which we've already started to learn some of that by doing the speed skaters and ladder drills. So again, I land on the balls of my feet. I bounce, I launch myself, and then I land softly. And the final progression we'll do is jumping off of the box now and landing properly. This is going to create a greater degree of impact by jumping off the box instead of onto it, because now you're dropping. There's more forces at play when you drop down off the box as opposed to jumping up onto the box. Your body doesn't have to travel down as far, and you're not going to get as much impact. So after you've gotten confident after a period of time on the box, and maybe you've built up the height of it a bit, you can start jumping off from it, and again, sticking that landing and making sure you're landing quietly and softly. Again, I bounce out of the bottom, I stick, and then I turn and step back up. Okay, never jump back up, especially not backwards for obvious reasons. One more time, I drop, I bounce out of the bottom like I did going up, soft landing, and I give it a little bit of a pause. I stick it. I make sure I'm steady on my feet. Now, one more thing to be conscious of is how you land, not just softly, but where your legs are when you do so. This is something you work on right from the beginning when you do your squats. We always want the ankle, the knees, and the hips to be stacked on top of each other in a straight line. The most common thing that happens when people land or jump even is this. All right, this is called knock knee or knee valgus. All right, so this can come from two different places: weakness in the hips, in particular the glute complex, or it can come from pronated feet that are really flat. If the foot's flat, the knees come in. If the glutes are weak, the knees come in. So practice your squats by keeping your kneecaps always pointing in the same direction as your toes. So if your toes are out a bit, they point out. If they're pointing forward, the knees point forward. Same thing when you start hopping in the ladder. Don't allow your knees to come in, although that looks like a funky dance move you could do. But try to land with those knees still stacked and right over the toes. And then finally, when you land off that box or onto the box, knees are out, and you land softly as always. Please hit that like button and subscribe for more health and fitness content like this.